Hey, I want to talk a minute about emotionally abusive relationships since we're kind of like toying around with that area. And I'll try to keep this brief as I always do. No guarantees, but bear with me. Um, First of all, an emotionally abusive relationship can be hard to recognize, and there are a lot of reasons why. The It lies in the way that this thing develops. So you don't go into a relationship thinking that it's going to wind up being abusive. Does that make sense? You've met somebody and you're happy and you're excited and all those little thingies that go along with a new relationship, and all of a sudden you come to a realization that things aren't too groovy here. So it's a subtle, it's a covert, it's a manipulative kind of a thing. It's an attack on your self esteem, and it really is, in the realm of manipulation, a way to cause you to doubt yourself, to begin to think, maybe I'm wrong. In a healthy relationship, there's caring, there's interdependence, um, so on and so forth. And I'm not trying to school you on how to have a relationship. You prioritize affection, uh, care for the other person's well-being, comfort, etc. All those things that are pretty easily recognizable. That's common sense, really. An abusive relationship begins when there begins to be a misuse and an abuse of sometimes power. Um, and what the person is trying to do is isolate their partner, manipulate their partner, control their partner, and they're priming them for an emotional desert. I'm not going to go into the reasons a person does that. They're obviously not very mentally healthy. There could have been a lot of things in their past to cause them to be this way, but nonetheless, it seems as though there's enough information through the research to indicate that there is a pattern that's established, and apparently it's very recognizable once you know what to look for. Um, Most people are susceptible to being in an emotionally abusive relationship. Why? Because you care about the other person. So you're opening up your emotions. Um, if a person is narcissistic, if they're psychopathic, if they're sociopathic, they most likely are not going to reveal that to you right away. If they do, you're not going to wind up having a relationship. So they mask it, and that makes it difficult to sometimes recognize. They can slowly but surely manipulate you into thinking that this is the greatest thing that's ever happened, and then comes the downfall. Here's something interesting that a lot of people don't think about. You're thinking about romantic partners in most cases, but guess what? Parents can do this. Friends can do this. Colleagues can do this. A manager can do this. They can strip away your self esteem, can introduce doubt into your thinking. And in particular, in a romantic relationship, it can be both parties ripping each other. So it's kind of a lot. It's a convoluted thing. Um, there are certain folk that will stay in an emotionally abusive relationship. If you've experienced it in the past, um, particularly if you've witnessed it in a family relationship, you may not be as capable of removing yourself from a relationship like this, which sounds rather odd. You would think, well, I know about this, therefore I'm not going to go this deeply into this relationship. But it really, for some reason, doesn't work that way. And I don't know honestly why. Um, it's kind of borderline learned helplessness in a way. So I hope this makes sense so far. I want to jump ahead just a bit so that we don't get bogged down in this thing, because there's so many directions to go in here. Why is this person abusive? Why is this person allowing themselves to be abused? There are a million and one reasons, but let's look at red flags. Let's look and see what could hopefully alert a person that, hey, something's wrong. It's simple things, name calling, um, and then gaslighting. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. It's not a necessarily a psychological term, but what is it? It's making you question your own memory, make you question your perceptions, sometimes even as heavy duty as your own sanity. Depends on how well this person, how good they are at manipulation. An invasion of your privacy. Even though we're in a relationship, we have private moments, we have private things. Um, Extreme attention seeking behaviors, a lack of empathy, um, and so on and so forth. Isolation from friends, family, and support systems. Probably sounds a lot to you like borderline personality disorder. And believe me, that's not out of the question. So you you run through these experiences, and then you begin to develop a fear because you don't want to upset the partner because you know what's coming, and then it becomes a form of punishment. Um, and it's silly little things in the beginning that become very unsilly later. Like, well, if you don't do this, I'm not hugging you. No, you made me mad. I'm not hugging you, or I'm not giving you a kiss, or whatever the case is. If you're not complying with their demands, then they do some of these things that are childish that can become serious. Um, Another way to recognize this is arguments. If they're not normal, in an argument that's normal, both parties present their sides of the argument. Um, but if you're entering into or in an abusive relationship, the abuser is gonna make no attempt to listen or listen to what you had to say, or even try to understand your position. There's no compromise. They'll say, "I'll compromise if you're going to do this, or I'm going to do this," or whatever the case is. It's more in the realm of a punishment or a threat. Um, and then it escalates: yelling and screaming, personal insults, humiliation, and even sometimes subtle threats. Have to be careful with those, particularly if they become physical. And then when you say that hurts my feelings or that upsets me or whatever, then they accuse you of having overly sensitive feelings. Um, it sometimes makes you feel like you're overreacting. So be on guard for these sorts of things. Your clients, if you're going to be counseling, will present some of these things to you, and kind of tip you off as to what the problem potentially could be. Um, Physical abuse is not a guaranteed automatic. Many times it's just emotional, BPD. Um, I'd have to see the newer statistics. At one point in time, BPD did not carry with it a high incidence of physical abuse. But I haven't, be honest with you, I haven't looked at the statistics in about 6 months or so could be wrong. Uh, it could have escalated into both physical and emotional. Uh, and also, either one, we're talking about emotional here, has long term effects on receiving partner's mental health, anxiety, guilt, low self-esteem. I don't know if I've spoken in this class before about the importance and the understanding of the power of self-esteem. It can it leads some people to murder. So it's a serious thing. Um, because there are usually no physical displays. There's nothing that you can readily see in the abused. Then many times it's not recognized in general. Law enforcement has a big problem with this um, due to the absence of physical things, scratches, bruises, that sort of thing. Law is, in North Carolina at least, if a police officer is called out to a domestic thing, the first thing you try to do is determine who has the marks on them. And the argument is who started it, so on and so forth. There are cases where the parties both have scratches. And in North Carolina, if you go on a domestic call as a police officer, somebody is going to jail. That's state law. If the abuser or the accused abuser has no marks and the one that's making the accusation does, then it's not up to the law enforcement officer to determine anything other than who's getting the handcuffs. So it's hard to spot. Emotional abuse leaves no physical scars. Last thing I want to discuss about this is how it comes about. It's not overnight. It's very subtle, very slow. The abuser doesn't want you to recognize this. Again, I'm not going to go into why a person would do this. There's some obvious things, but then there's some they're not so obvious, and we'd get way off track with that. So they don't want you to notice a change. I will say this: they're most all on a power trip of some sort. That sounds pretty amateurish, but it's kind of a given. Um, but slowly over time, uh, they become a little jealous or whatever. They isolate you somewhat, and then they slowly but surely tighten down the tension until finally it's full blown, and you realize you're in that relationship. What damages your chance to get out of it? Well, rationalization. Oh, it's okay. He's having a bad day. She's having a bad day. But if they're having a bad day every day, then that should be an obvious giveaway. So it's rationalization. Could be other ways you rationalize it. The abused gets used to it. Oh, that's just the way our relationship is. There's actually some neurological discussion about brain chemistry and becoming conditioned in responses to your partner. You become accustomed to this up and down, peak valley situation in your relationship, and basically you need to get out of it. Not as easily done as it is said. So I just wanted to hit some high points of this, and I'll shut it down here. Just something to bear in mind because we are discussing sexuality and relationships. All right, take care.